In local matters, it's looking as though Manhattan's District Attorney Cy Vance Jr. is unlikely to run for re-election this spring. Vance has held New York City's most prestigious job in law enforcement since 2009. State financial records reveal the once prolific fundraiser has raised just a little over $4,000 ahead of the Democratic primary in June. The incumbent DA hasn't publicly voiced his plans to run for a fourth term in office, opening the door to the 8 challengers looking to replace him. Mr. Vance is currently involved in an ongoing investigation into the financial dealings of former President Donald Trump. Should he choose not to run, it could have a serious impact on the timeline of the investigation. Joining me now is Josefa Velasquez. She's a senior reporter at The City. Josefa, welcome. Great to have you with us. So the Manhattan District Attorney's probe into former President Trump is by far the most high-profile investigation of Vance's career. If he does not run again, what will that mean for the timeline of the probe? And does it need to be complete by the time he leaves office?
So it doesn't necessarily need to be complete if he does, in fact, decide not to run. It does complicate things a little bit further for the investigation because different district attorneys have different priorities, and perhaps the next one that comes into office will put this on the back burner, not make it as much as a priority as Cy Vance has. So while it doesn't necessarily mean that the inquiry into Donald Trump and the Trump organization is over, it does muddy the waters a bit in terms of what the outcome will be, how quickly we might be getting a resolution on that.
Mm-hmm. So, as we've mentioned, Cy Vance has only raised $4,000 ahead of the Democratic primary in June. But of course, a lot of people are reading a lot into that. Do you think that if he does run, he believes his probe into the former president will be enough sort of high-profile fuel to propel him to the victory in the June primary?
So the Vance campaign is playing a very tricky game right now where there are a lot of things that Vance has done in the past that don't look great. So we're talking about his relationship with Harvey Epstein and his failure to bring up charges against the Trump children. With that being said, it would be a major win for Vance to have some sort of blockbuster takedown of the former president and his organization, which could really boost money into his account. He's someone who has shown that he can raise millions of dollars if need be. He's very well connected in the political sphere. And the fact that we do have these ongoing investigations does show that he still has some clout to pull. So while, yes, it doesn't look great that he only has $4,000 while his challengers have upwards of millions of dollars, he could reverse that very quickly in terms if he does get an investigation or makes publicly what they're looking at and any sort of criminal charges.
Right. And of course, his isn't the only investigation. New York Attorney General Letitia James has also launched investigations into the former president and his company for tax fraud. Should the DA's office fail to press criminal charges against the former president, what type of recourse could he face from the state's attorney general?
Sure. So the state's attorney general is actually looking at a civil matter. It started out with the investigation into hush money that was paid by his then lawyer, Michael Cohen. It's now broadened to some of the Trump organization's properties and real estate dealings. And not only is he facing this matter from the Attorney General's office, the state tax department is also looking at whether or not Trump and his organization had lied on documents to get favorable treatment and tax cuts. So while the DA's investigation, we might not see an outcome from it, there are several other options that the state could weigh, whether it's through the state attorney general, Tish James, or through the state tax department. You also have federal investigations going on, including several from the Southern District of New York, which is obviously run by the DOJ. So there's several different recourses that New York can take to try to prosecute Trump.
Right. And Josefa, the DA's office recently expanded the scope of its investigation, issuing grand jury subpoenas for records related to Mr. Trump's Seven Springs estate in New York. What does that tell us about the current state of the probe, and what implications does this have for the former president?
Yeah, so in recent months, the probe has widened to now include some of the properties in New York, and not only that, but as for the Trump Organization's lender, Deutsche Bank. So what started out as a probe into the Trump Organization, the President Trump's presidential campaign, is now broadening and getting more serious. And we still have this pending matter of what's happening to Donald Trump's tax returns, which is an issue that's going to be decided by our highest court after the Trump and his lawyers have sued time and time again to stop the DA's office from getting those records. So it's a lot to keep track of, but there seems to be different avenues that everyone in New York is pursuing. It's definitely a very different New York than the one that President Trump was used to back in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, that's for sure. And Josefa Velasquez, thank you so much for keeping us up to date on all that. We appreciate it.
Thank you.